I've created a list. So the 10 most important government blockchain use cases. And of course, the very first one is voting systems. It was actually the U.S. Postal Service that filed a patent application for creating exactly that, a blockchain record-keeping system for voting for presidential elections. Nothing ever came of it, but they actually thought through the process of understanding what could be the impact of having blockchain as a use case for voting. And one of the most important aspects of that, of course, is by having blockchain, you wouldn't have to be restricted to wherever you are. You would have a unique ID, and of course, we're not going to have these things until the government actually starts issuing unique IDs to us. We have paper versions of these things, passports, driver's license, some of our vital records, things like, birth certificates, things like that happen. But once we have the government issuing these unique IDs, we'll be able to vote anywhere we are in the world, or even in space if we were working up on the ISS. So what we should be thinking about is voting systems have the potential for a huge change as it relates to blockchain technology. Another one, of course, was actually referenced earlier, and that is on land registry and property ownership. It was really Estonia, the state of Estonia, one of the Baltic states, that has put the first to put all of their land registries on the blockchain. And the value of that is really quite straightforward, and that is that you can't go in and take it away. You've basically eliminated all fraud. The problem, though, is that we have this legacy system of, hundreds of years in some places and thousands of years in other places where you have all these records going back for forever. How do you digitize them and bring them up to speed? But the value of it is really quite paramount. Think of yourself in a country where what you're faced with is a regime change, and they all of a sudden come in and say, your land is my land, and you have nothing to actually back that up. So that even when the regime that has taken over is out of power, there's really nothing you can do because they've either destroyed the records and prevented you from actually regaining your particular asset. So land registry and ownership, we're starting to see a few places, a few counties are actually playing around with this idea. And I think that it will be transformative for us because it's really going to change some of the things that we do, especially in the acquisition of land, your house. All of a sudden, you're going to eliminate one of the bottlenecks of that process, and that is the title company's job. The title company's job is to go and let me research this, make sure that there's no encumbrances on it, and I will issue an insurance policy to the lender that, yes, in fact, if there's a problem, I will actually pay for that problem. So it's really an insurance policy that they have. But with blockchain, it's no. Joe owned it. He's selling it to Ruth, and that's all there is to it. And the transfer is made, and it has complete transparency. The next area is the supply chain management. The provenance of materials is really the most important thing that we really face ourselves on a regular, ongoing basis. It is estimated that up to 1/3 of all airplane parts do not have provenance. And that means that you don't know where it came from. It may not meet the standard. So if you're flying frequently, and if you think about it, the jet engine is thousands of parts, and all of a sudden you find out that there is an aspect of it that is not up to code, well, it's kind of life-threatening to do it. Think of it from a pharmaceutical standpoint. So you get some of these base materials that are made in pharmaceuticals. If you don't have the way to prove where they came from, you don't know the quality that you're actually getting. I mean, we've been dealing with provenance from a supply chain standpoint for a long time. Probably one of the first areas where provenance became important were in diamonds. We have now blood diamonds and regular diamonds, and yet to the regular eye, they're identical. They are identical, but we're faced with a situation where blockchain technology could actually provide something that is really quite instrumental in ensuring that what we have and what we're buying is really what we're getting. The next area is actual digital identification management. And again, this gets back to the voting systems. How do you prove who we are? And so one of the things, I actually was having lunch with the state senator. He spoke earlier today, and he was showing on his phone the various states that have digital driver's licenses. And really, that's the start. It's happening from a kind of a grassroots up. What we're seeing is from the state's approach. They're coming out and saying, we need to be able to do this. But the moment that the federal government comes out and says, we're going to issue you a digital ID, is really when a lot of these activities and new opportunities and new use cases will just suddenly emerge. Because then it won't matter. I mean, if from a voting standpoint, getting back to that, if you have a digital ID, you can only vote once because you only have one digital ID. The government is in theory not going to issue you multiple IDs. Maybe for me, multiple personality person, I could maybe get a different ID for each one. But nonetheless, what we're dealing with though is the ability to identify who we are. And of course, then the next is public records management. California has been kind of leading the way. Starting last fall, they allow any of their county clerks to record any vital records on a blockchain. And it's their pilot program. It's not mandated. But you're starting to see a number of the California vital records being put on actually a Tezos blockchain. And so what's interesting about that is they're starting with birth and death certificates, but they're also including marriage and adoption verifications. We're starting to see these things happen, and what that's going to be for us is it'll be then a very easy way for us to use transparency in identifying what people have done, eliminating any particular frauds that have existed out there, but it'll also mean that we have easily accessible records to prove who we are. The next area, and this is really a more of a, how do I put this? It's problematic because how do you go about through taxation and revenue collection? Part of that is that the government, in its genius back in the 1930s when they were first introducing Social Security tax, is that they didn't mandate the person pay the tax. They actually told the employers, you have to withdraw it and you have to pay it to us. And the penalty's not on the person, it's on you, the companies. And so really what we've seen is a situation where a lot of our taxes, we never write a check for it. It's just withdrawn from our earnings. And so it makes it very easy. Well, the same is going to be true once we start putting these things on blockchain. The ability to have everything tracked completely. You could almost, instead of making them a semi-annual or even a quarterly type of payment system, it could be daily. You could literally pay the taxes on what you had. The government could extract that for themselves on a daily basis. We've started to see that with utility companies. There's a utility company in England. What they did is they said, we're not going to issue you a bill now every month. What we're going to do is you're just going to be charged. You have to set up a wallet, and you're going to be charged for what you consume, energy standpoint, every single day. Well, for the energy company, all of a sudden it made incredible cash flows because now there's not a delay. It just made it so much better. Think about that, though, from the vast quantity of funds that the government actually takes. It would be just quite amazing. The next, also, again, these are government blockchain use cases, would be through welfare distribution. One of the biggest problems or some of the complaints that people have is about some of the fraud that exists in welfare distribution, checks and things like that. We've solved some of those problems. It used to be like if you were getting a welfare check, you were getting something that you had to take to your bank, and then they issued kind of a currency, a type of fiat currency that you did, and now they've moved to credit cards. The ability, though, for government to actually then use blockchains, they could use it as a total way to provide transparency for this. The ability to be able to provide any of these things, whether it's welfare, whether it's Social Security. It would also, if you thought of it even into the healthcare components, if the government was be able to pay doctors for their Medicare and Medicaid payments, what would that do for doctors? All of a sudden, a lot of their billing components would be would go away. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be fraud, but the beautiful thing about blockchain is it would track that. So it would be, you know what, you can try to screw me out of, this is the government saying it, you can try to screw me out of some of the money, but I will have a complete audit trail on this, and I'll be able to pin it on you. The next is that smart contracts for public procurement. We're starting to get into a situation where blockchain is not only important for what we're doing, but we're also now integrating other Web3 technologies like IoT. The ability to put sensors on things to actually then allow for us to do things. What we would be able to do is that governments could then be using these smart contracts to buy and pay for services and products that they use. Also, they could do it from a maintenance standpoint. Think of all the bridges we've gone through in the past, probably 8, 10, 12 years, trillions of dollars worth of infrastructure funding. We have no tracking on any of that. And a lot of it is forced on the deterioration of our bridges. I mean, think of that, public safety. You have a bridge here, either you're driving over it safely or you're driving under it safely, unless you're in Baltimore and then it just collapses. But the ability for having sensors and then having it tracked on a blockchain would be crucial to the support and operations of our government. The next would, of course, be something that is very relevant to this area, and that is we have the consumption of energy here due to the data centers. And it was the gentleman from Flux who was saying that what is the biggest problem? The biggest problem is on energy, finding enough energy to support these things. You can't just spin up, unless you're a nuclear power plant, you just can't spin up turbines and water and wind and solar energy to support these things at the drop of a hat. And so really what we would find is we would find that having energy trading and grid management, grid safety, one of the biggest things that I've noticed in the news as of late is the vulnerabilities of our electrical and energy grids. This is a problem. If we had these things on the blockchain, A, there would be tracking, complete tracking. B, we would know who's accessing these things and be able to manage these things from a cybersecurity management standpoint. And then really the last thing, and again, this is my top 10 list of government blockchain use cases, would be on cross-border payments. One of the things that we track is our trade deficit. And again, we track this from a very big macro standpoint. But if all of a sudden we were able to start to track things down to a more granular level, we would find ourselves with the ability to optimize these cross-border payments. And again, from the government standpoint, the ability to have things like let me go back here, and I'm just summarizing here, voter systems that provided a high level of integrity, a land registration and property ownership, a supply chain management for not only everything that we buy, the government buys and delivers, digital identity management, public records management, taxation and revenue collection, welfare distribution, smart contracts for public procurement, and energy trading and grid management, and finally, cross-border payments. These are some of the use cases. And again, this is just my list. If I had another 10 minutes or so, I probably could have created another list of 10 that would be completely different from this. Government is probably going to be the largest user of blockchain technology in the future. The problem that we have with blockchain technology and government is government is a very, very slow-moving sheet of ice. And there's a lot of rock underneath that sheet of ice that's preventing it from really moving forward. So it'll be something that happens. As an example, one of the things that I thought would be the easiest blockchain adoption for government would be in the Patent and Trademark Office. These are straightforward. You know exactly what's going to happen. It's a sequential event of things. I mean, one of the biggest problems when you're filing for a patent is who files first. But now we're getting to the point is who started working on this first as part of that application process. And so by doing something as simple as putting all of that on the blockchain, it would provide unlimited transparency that just doesn't exist even today. And it's pretty transparent now. I don't know if you've ever gone through the process of filing a patent or filing for a trademark. It's a cumbersome process that doesn't have a lot of transparency for it. This would be some of the most amazing things that we have.